If you're looking for a review of the iPhone 12 mini, you might as well watch my review of the iPhone 12 because this is the same exact phone, just a smaller body. But with that smaller body, there comes some minor differences. So let's talk about it. The 5.4-inch display is pretty small by today's standards, but not so long ago, anything larger than a 5.4-inch display was considered a phablet. Y'all remember that? Phablets? Like when Samsung came out with a Note, all of a sudden the term phablets came out, but now you're looking at today, all large phones are just large phones. Phablets are no longer a thing. I don't remember the last time I've heard someone say the term phablets. Unfortunately, with the transitions to these larger phones, there were still those people that just wanted a smaller phone. But if they chose to go with the smaller phone, they just had to sacrifice so many specs as well as features. Before the iPhone mini, if you wanted a small iPhone, your only real option was going with the iPhone SE. But going with that also brought a lot of drawbacks. And the biggest drawback for me was that design. The design with those huge bezels, those stupid big bezels on that phone was just so ugly. And I don't know how people was even using iPhones back then with those crazy big bezels. And not only you had the older design with those huge bezels, you also didn't have Face ID. Even though I'm not a big fan of Face ID, Face ID is still really cool, and you had that full screen display with that notch. But you had no Face ID, you still had Touch ID with that huge Touch ID button. And even though iPhone moved to gestures, the iPhone SE still had that button for the home button with the Touch ID in it, which made no sense. But with all of that, the iPhone SE still sold a lot. It sold really well, and just for the simple fact that people wanted a smaller iPhone. I think once Apple realized how well the SE was selling, they decided to introduce the 12 mini, a flagship phone in a smaller package. This phone literally has all the same specs and features as its bigger brother, with the only difference is being a smaller display and a smaller battery because it's a smaller phone. But outside of that, it's still an OLED display. It still have a very high resolution, and it's not missing anything. I spoke a lot about the design in my unboxing and review of the iPhone 12, and that's because the design of the iPhone 12 is my favorite part about this year's iPhone. With the flat sides, the flat display, the flat back, everything just flat with this phone. It just got rid of all those curves that's been trending for the last couple years with the design of phones. It's so flat on the bottom, I could just stand the phone up by itself. This design isn't really anything new. It's pretty much the same design of the iPhone 5S from way back in the day, and most people would argue that was the best looking iPhone, well, at least up until now, because the iPhone 12 definitely taking that crown. But it just took that design and brought it into 2020 and just gave it that bezel-less display, and it has now is really nice look and feel. The only drawback I have with this design is Face ID. The iPhone mini is much smaller than all the other 12s, but everything shrunk but that notch. That notch is just ridiculously big. I was always big on all the other iPhones, but with the smaller iPhone and the same size notch, it just looks ridiculous. It always looked ridiculous, but even more ridiculous, and it's also causing a little bit of issues with me. The notch takes up much more of the display in comparison to any other iPhone, and not only does it take up some of the display, it has now become a usability issue, especially when I'm watching YouTube videos. YouTube videos in the 2:1 format, it slightly cuts off a little bit of the video, and if I'm using certain apps, it also cuts off the top portion of the app. It interferes with some of the UI of the apps. Those apps I was having issues with have been fixed by now. I just had to adjust the UI for those apps. I watch a lot of videos on my phone, and a 5.4-inch display is just a little bit too small for me, and only when I'm watching videos on my phone is when I really wish I had a larger display. And during those times, that's when I switched to my iPad Air 4, and that iPad is a great companion to having a smaller phone. One thing I really enjoy about having a smaller phone is working out. I run a lot with my phone, and I normally run with my phone inside of an armband, and having my iPhone mini in an armband, I can tell it's even on my arm. Using a larger phone, it tends to bounce around or slide down my arm, so I have to adjust my armband tight around my arm, And this seems like I'm cutting off my blood circulation when I'm making my armband so tight. But using the iPhone mini, like I snap it on there, that thing doesn't move. I can't even feel like anything is on my arm. And it just makes my workout like really that much more enjoyable, having my phone on me and not be able to feel like it's there. So I think that's like a huge win for the iPhone mini. Having a smaller display with relatively large hands, I was concerned about the typing experience, but I can't say I didn't have any real issues with the typing experience using the mini. The only issue I really had was that trash autocomplete. I just can't stand iPhone and their autocomplete. It autocompletes to the craziest things that has nothing to do with the context of my sentence. But that's a whole nother story about iOS I'm not about to get into right now. But as far as typing has been really well. I don't feel too cramped while typing on here. I'm typing just as fast. It just works just like any other iPhone. Types fast, autocomplete is trash. My other concern with the mini is battery life. The battery life on the iPhone 12 was okay, but on 5G, it was pretty bad. So with a smaller battery inside of the mini, I've pretty much was expecting just terrible battery life, but I can say that I was getting the same exact experience as I was on the 12. As in the mini is using this phone on Wi-Fi, I'm getting pretty good battery life, but going to 5G, whew, it's bad. Like it's burning through battery with the 12 mini just as it did with the iPhone 12, and I'm pretty sure it does it on the Pro too. If you have the 20-watt charger, the phone charges up pretty fast. In about 30 minutes I get about 50% charge, so charging is not too bad. The mini is also compatible with MagSafe, and MagSafe works just as well as it does on any other iPhone. I don't take a lot of pictures, but it's good to know that I'm not sacrificing anything by having the mini other than like the 12 or the Pro, because this uses the same wide angle lens as the Pro and the 12, also the same wide angle lens as the Pro and the 12. The only difference is for the Pro you have the zoom lens, but 80% of the time I'm using the wide angle lens, and then the other like 15% of the time I'm using the ultra wide. So that 5% of the time where I would actually be trying to get that extra reach with the zoom lens, that's when like, oh, I don't have a zoom lens. But there's not too often I'm trying to use the zoom lens. Majority of the time I'm using the wide, and there's a few times I need that extra wide angle lens that I can switch to because it's on there. But the picture quality have been really good. It's the same processing here, the processing power is the same, so the image quality comes out really good. As far as comparing it to any other iPhone, it's the same picture quality. Like you're not really losing out on anything by having the mini. One of the big drawbacks of going with a smaller phone is always a hit the performance. Going with a smaller phone, it always uses an inferior processor than the larger phones, but going with the mini, it is the exact same A14 Bionic processor in the mini that it is in the 12, the 12 Pro, the 12 Pro Max, and it's Apple's latest processor in here. So performance on the iPhone 12 is just as good as it is on the 12, 12 Pro, 12 Pro Max. There's no hit performance going with this mini. Like it's literally a flagship phone just in a smaller body. There is one small difference. The 12 mini and the 12 has one less gig of RAM than the Pros. iOS is so efficient that it doesn't really use a lot of RAM, so you will never notice the difference between the 12s and the 12 Pros. What is a big hit to performance is the lack of a high refresh display, and that goes for the whole entire 12 lineup. And this is terrible, being that 2020 is the year of high refresh displays. I mean, phones has 120 Hz displays, 90 Hz displays, and it just seems like iPhone just say, huh, we just gonna give everyone this mediocre 60 Hz display. And it just seems like a phone in 2018, because 2019, like second half of 2019, I think, when the phones really start giving us 90 Hz displays, and then 2020 it's like now we're seeing 120 Hz display, and this makes a huge difference to perceived performance of any phone. Like if you're coming from like an older iPhone or pretty much any other iPhone and you come into the 12, you probably won't miss it because you haven't ever experienced before. But if you're coming from like any other phone, any Android phone, you will have at least a 90 Hz display, and coming from that 90 hertz or 120 hertz display back to a 60 hertz display, I mean, it's a drastic difference in performance. Like, things are just so much more smoother with a high refresh rate than it is with that 60 hertz display. And I think Apple just dropped the ball on this, but I kind of have a thought process behind that. I think they just chose not to go with the high refresh rate display because battery life already wasn't too good with 5G. So having 5G on top of a high refresh rate display would probably just kill the iPhones altogether. The battery probably lasts a whole 30 minutes if it had both a high refresh rate display and 5G. So I think maybe we'll see a high refresh rate display in 2021 with iPhone 13, but who knows? You know, Apple, they like to hold off on features as long as they can to keep finding a reason to sell you a phone. But yeah, I think performance wise, this is great. It's just missing a key feature with the high refresh rate display. iPhone 12 mini has really brought back small flagship. It has the same design, the same performance, and all the same features as its bigger brothers, and you're not sacrificing anything. I'm personally still shocked that I was able to use an iPhone for this long. This has been what, a month and a half of me using iPhones, and it's crazy to me that I'm still using it. I'm about to get rid of it real soon, but I'm still using it. The only issue I have with iPhones is just iOS, and more specifically the lack of customization and this terrible notification system. But I'm not gonna really go into all my issues with iOS right now. This ain't the video for that. But personally, I feel that if you're an iPhone fan or you just like iPhones or whatever, and you're trying to choose between all of the iPhones, I think you should just save money and go with the 12 mini because you're not sacrificing anything. And the only reason I would say to go to anything else is if you want a bigger display, and I would say just go with the regular 12. This is like the first year that I can see that there is like no real reason to choose any of the Pros, the Pro or the Pro Max. Like, there is no reason to choose them. So this year is just about the 12 mini and the 12. Save your money. Don't go out there and go get them Pros unless you just want to be like, oh, I got a Pro, I got a Pro. But yeah, iPhone did a good job this year with these iPhones. Shocked me. That's it. Thanks for watching. Y'all know the drill. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so it can notify you when the next video drop. This is Joe, and that was another Joe Tech Talk. Thanks for watching. I'm out. And Apple, if you're watching, put the charger brick back in the box. Thank you. Okay, I'm gone.